Hello everyone, today we are going to start our journey with the Byzantine Empire, and today we're going to talk about how it actually got established, and it's kind of complicated, so let's just get right into it. Okay, so the Byzantine Empire, as most of you know, spawned out of the Roman Empire, but the question is, how did it actually do that? Well, it had to do with this guy by the name of Diocletian. Diocletian, as you see the emperor bust on the right over here, was a Roman emperor, and he was brutal and horrible and downright mean. He is most actually known for his reign of trying to eliminate Christianity. He hated Christianity and did basically everything in his power to obliterate it, and under his rule, tens of thousands of Christians would be killed. But for our purposes, we're talking about him in the realm of the Byzantine Empire, but it doesn't mean he's any less of a bad person. But the key thing that he realized is he realized that his empire was too big and that they, or at least he felt, that they couldn't rule it with just one man. So in the year 285, he had a plan, and his plan was to create a situation in which multiple emperors would kind of rule the empire and make it much more efficient. Now, his initial plan was to take the empire and split it in two. He, Diocletian, would take control of the east. He then appointed his friend and general Maximian to rule the west. The west would primarily be from kind of Italy over and North Africa, and then the other way toward Turkey, which would be ruled by Diocletian. Now, these two guys realized the emperor was still too big, so what they decided to do was appoint some friends of theirs, if you will, as like subordinate emperors. Those guys got the title of Caesar. In the east, under Diocletian, you had a man by the name of Galerius, and in the west, you had a man by the name of Constantius. And when it was all said and done, it kind of looked like this: four different men ruling in four different areas. The largest of which actually controlled by Maximian, although he's going to switch that up. You have Constantius up here in the yellow, you've got Galerius in the middle, and you've got over here in the east Diocletian. And this is when it got the title the tetrarchy, that these four men would run the empire. But alas, it was not to last. Now, oddly enough, Diocletian eventually retires and becomes a gardener. I'm not even kidding, a gardener. So he's doing plants and, growing fruit or something. But as a result, Maximian will then move into the east and take the title of Augustus over there. Maximian will then pass his land down to his son Maxentius. Now, after that, it gets a little complicated. And I have up here Fight Club because after Diocletian dies, it is going to become a fight club because the fact of the matter is eventually a bunch of different guys all want to be in charge. Now, Constantius, then shortly after Diocletian abdicates, Constantius dies, and his son Constantine moves in. Constantine will hold Britain, Gaul, and Spain. And he's the first emperor that really has to do a lot of military stuff because the Gauls revolt, and then another group called the Alemanni revolt. And he is really going to establish himself as the best military leader. The Alemanni were really, really powerful and in many ways could almost rival the Romans at that point until Constantine crushes them. Now, he later will then gain Maximian as a subordinate emperor because Maximian will actually try to take over his son's land, but is defeated by his son in battle. And in order to keep Maximian in power in the east and to gain himself an ally, because Constantine always knew he was going to try to take the whole thing over, he is able to ally with Maximian with the promise of helping him, and therefore he knows he's got an ally if he wants to move forward, and a guy to help him with the barbarians. Because if you look at this map, Constantine holds this area up here, okay, and he's got to deal with Franks and Lombards. He's got some legitimate problems. Maxentius is right in the middle. This guy Licinius, who is Maxentius's brother, will eventually take over this area. We'll get to it later. And then you have Maximian over here. Now, so you have some initial fighting with barbarians, you have Maximian fighting Maxentius, but then eventually you get a timeout. Constantine is going to marry a woman by the name of Fausta, she's right here, to cement Maximian's alliance. Now, it also puts Maxentius at bay because Fausta is his sister. So at least for a little while, we've got a timeout. But it really isn't going to last so long. We still have that Galerius guy who is hanging out, and Galerius is going to take a subordinate emperor of his own, this guy by the name of Severus, as of course you see over here. Now, Galerius and Severus are eventually going to go to war with Maximian and Maxentius, or let's just call them M and M, and Severus is going to get killed. But Galerius is still going to be able to hold on to some power for a little while. And he was actually a pretty good emperor in his area. Galerius is also going to stop Diocletian's persecutions. He is also going to be able to defeat the Sassanids so they can't expand. But eventually he dies from either from descriptions of cancer or gangrene. And it's just pretty terrible. And that's at that point that Licinius, the brother of Maxentius, takes power. So what you have here is, once again, we pop up back a couple slides. You have Constantius over here, or Constantine, who controls Maximian, and the Maximian's two sons are in here, and it's really just a matter of time. And now it's backstabbing time. Here's Maximian over here. Here's Constantine. Okay, in the year 310, Maximian revolts while Constantine was fighting barbarians again, because that's what you always have to do. And of course you know that. Constantine comes back, he crushes Maximian, and then makes Maximian commit suicide. Then we break out into a full-scale civil war where, with Maximian out, Maxentius realized that Constantine has got him on either side, and they actually go to war. And the turning point of the battle is the turning point of the war is the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, depicted over here, in which Constantine lays the smackdown on Maxentius. And then by the year 313, Maxentius is captured and he's killed. And then 9 years later, he finishes off the final brother, Licinius. And in the year 324, this is the empire. It's at one of its largest sizes of all time. It even goes well up into Britain, you see here. Pretty incredible. Now, of course, you have this idea, well, okay, so isn't Constantine a Roman emperor? He is, but he's going to set up everything moving to eventually becoming the Byzantine Empire. The key thing that he does is he also realizes that the Western Empire, Rome, Spain, Gaul, by this point doesn't have a whole heck of a lot left, and is actually well out of the major trade routes in the world. So he is going to move the empire east, and he's going to focus on building the great city of Constantinople, because what kind of general and emperor are you if you can't name a city after yourself? The city was called Byzantium, but he's going to change that. And as you can see here, it's got these walls. You've got harbor, 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 harbor. You've got wonderful churches. The city would be incredible, and we'll be talking about it a lot moving forward. But he's going to move the capital east and everything else to the east. He's also going to establish Christianity in the empire with the Edict of Milan. Now, the interesting thing about him is that he was fairly a decent Christian. I mean, he liked the idea of Christianity. He actually didn't officially convert until he was about dead. But his mother, Helena, was a big-time Christian, and sometimes you got to do things to make mom happy. But he saw the benefit of Christianity. It was a growing force. It could be a political force. And what he is going to do with the Edict of Milan in the year 313 is when he actually passes it. He is going to legalize Christianity, and of course Christianity wouldn't stop from there. What he also establishes with the concept that the emperor rules any and all things. And you'll see this in Byzantium. This is where we get the concept of a huge jeweled crown, a scepter, a throne, that the emperor should be lavish and he should wear rich clothing. Not that other emperors didn't do this beforehand, but this becomes actually the mold for the European king. And this is really important to understand that. Okay, the idea of the obeisance, if you will, to the emperor or the king. You actually bow down before him, you kiss the ground before him. It's pretty huge. There is no more Senate. We're getting rid of it. Stop it. It doesn't exist. And the other thing he does is, I swear to God, guys, this is a word. He establishes concept of Caesaropapism in the idea that even though Christianity is important, the emperor is the guy in charge, and that the emperor rules by divine favor of God. This is going to be a huge idea called the divine right of kings, and it all goes back to Constantine. He is not divine, he probably thought of himself as pseudo divine, but he rules with the grace of God. And that's really, really important. And he also appoints the patriarch, or the head of the church, which eventually would become the Eastern Church, which we'll talk about more later. But what he does is, after him, his sons actually battle each other and they all die, and his entire line actually dies out as well. But what's going to happen is, shortly after his reign, the empire will actually be divided into an East and a West. And we already talked about the destruction of the Western Empire, but it's the Eastern Empire that's going to grow. And by the 500s, it really is a separate empire. They really see themselves as Greek, not Roman, and everything was established by Constantine. All right, guys, so get your question, get your comments, and I will see you tomorrow.